Well, I'm joined by Sandra Vasoli, who is joining us from the States, and James Peacock, who is joining us from the UK. And of course, I'm here in Spain, but I have got Anne Boleyn. I've smuggled Anne Boleyn here to Spain. And yeah, we're going to be talking about a rather marvellous, wonderful new discovery. But first of all, I'd like you two to introduce yourselves. So perhaps Sandy, go first.
Certainly, ladies first.
That's it.
Thanks for inviting me, Claire. I mean, this is going to be a really fun and interesting discussion. I'm Sandy Vasoli, and as Claire said, I live in the U.S. and I am the author of 2 novels about Anne Boleyn and 1 narrative nonfiction book about the letter that Anne supposedly wrote from the Tower or authored from the Tower. And I research and do recordings and communicate with lots of my Tudor friends, and really I'm very interested in digging and seeing what else we can find about the woman whom we all love, Anne Boleyn.
Great. And James.
Hi there, everyone. I'm James, and I live here in the UK, and I run the Queen Anne Boleyn Society, which is on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And I'm also very lucky to work at Hampton Court Palace, a site very well connected to Anne Boleyn, obviously. Yeah, so very, very lucky. They're steeped in history.
Yeah, dream job that is. So this has recently hit the news, hasn't it? This, I think it was described at auction, this object that we're going to talk about, this artifact, as, I think, just a wooden carving, wasn't it? A wooden bird. And it went to auction and was sold, first of all, for £75. This is what The Guardian tells me anyway. I'm relying on The Guardian article here. And right. Then it, through research, which you're going to tell us more about, it was revealed to actually be a carving of Anne Boleyn's famous Falcon badge, which we all know, all Anne Boleyn fans worldwide will recognise, the white falcon, the crowned falcon with the sceptre on the tree stump with the white and red roses flowing from that barren tree stump. And, that being her badge. And it's just amazing. It's been identified as Anne's falcon, and that it perhaps was once, that it came from Hampton Court Palace. So I know nothing more than the Guardian story. So perhaps the two of you could enlighten me as to how this discovery was made.
I think Sandy best starts. She's the one who rolling on this.
Well, we'll start from the beginning and then we'll go back and forth because James and I have had, we've been very, very privileged and lucky to have a part to play in this. And it's actually, just like things are with Anne, and I know, Claire, you believe this because this is how you got started with the Anne Boleyn files, and I know James believes this. There's just something uncanny about how Anne, directs things or leads things. I've believed this for a long, long time. And this story is just, I think, one example of that. So we're both really privileged to even be involved at all. But for me, the story is that about a year ago, I decided that I was going to, unbeknownst to my husband, I was going to shop for just a little, maybe coffer or box or something from the Tudor era. If I could find something that was affordable, I just was one day looking around and, I kind of went on some different antique sites in the UK and I found something that I liked and I was pursuing it. And then somehow, and truly, I don't even know how, Paul's website popped up for me. And I looked at a couple things there and I found something that I liked. So, and his website says, please inquire. So I did. I sent him an email and he wrote back to me. And then we were talking about, the possibilities and the delivery. And I said, can I call you? So I did. We spoke. And in the course of the conversation, he said, because I have my website on my email, he said, I looked at your website and he said, we share a passion. And I said, what is that? And he said, for Anne Boleyn. And, he said, so I actually, we really connected on the phone. He said, I actually want to tell you about something that I found. And I said, okay, tell me. And he said, well, I think I found the carved emblem for Anne, her badge. And, so I said, you're kidding me. And the conversation continued and he sent me a photo of the unrestored Falcon.
Okay.
And I was like, this is incredible. And so, this is what I'll share with you. The story that he told me is that, as most antique dealers do in the UK, they scan the paper for listings, in the classifieds, selling, garage sales, estate sales, and that's how they can acquire some of the items that they get. So he did see something, and it was a grouping, and it was like, small cupboard, writing desk, small box, carved wooden bird. And he said he thought it was the estate of a deceased antique dealer. So he sent one of his guys out. He said, here's your budget, come back with this group. Because he said, I felt like one of the desks probably was, or could be, of the Tudor era. So it comes in a cardboard box, these three things. And he lifts out the bird and he lifts out the bird. And he looks at it and he thinks, it was filthy. This is really odd. But he thought it looked familiar. So he went and started to do some looking online. And he said, I almost died when I saw the drawings and the images that were so similar to this. So literally and he said the box of items was bought for £75.
Oh, wow. The whole box.
The box.
Wow.
And that was just that was an incidental. That's not even, of course, what he was looking for. He wanted the writing desk or the little coffer or whatever, which I don't know what they ended up being. But so now he's looking at this. And I think he then contacted his friend, David Holston, who is the head of Oak Interiors for Bonhams. I think they're good friends, and they started conferring on it. And at that point, I think that's when if some of you know, I know James knows, it came up for sale at Bonhams, I think in 2019, as part of, they had like a collection of English oak furniture. It came up for sale in the unrestored state. And it did not sell.
Okay.
So anyway, and what Paul told me is the reason that it didn't sell is that which of course, thank heaven that it didn't. There was one very famous historian who was desperate for it, but Paul said he didn't have a great feeling about it, so he did not let it go. They didn't agree on a price. And he said the reason that it didn't sell was because he had not done any fact finding. He hadn't done any analysis of it at that point. It was just as he had found it. And he certainly believed it to be Anne Boleyn's Falcon, but he really didn't know a whole lot more about it.
Yeah.
So in that conversation, we talked for a long time, and then we talked again. And, he said he knows that this is what it was. And his dream was for it to go to Hampton Court. But apparently he and David had not had any luck connecting with the right person at Hampton Court. And thus over to James.
Yeah,
I was like, well, I happen to know. So let me just make a comment on how weird this connection is, that I happen to connect with him, Paul, the loveliest man in the world. And then it was like, well, I think I know somebody. So James, take it away.
Oh, yes. So I remember, Sandy, you messaged me or emailed me about it. I think it was around this time last year or very beginning of the year.
Yeah.
I think which is crazy to think we've known about it all this time. And I remember you telling me about it, and it was just so exciting. And it was just that instant thought of, wow, imagine getting it back to Hampton Court, which would just be incredible. So I think it was around the very beginning of the year. We'd just gone into the third lockdown here in the UK. Things looked very bleak at the start of the year. And I sent an email to the lovely Tracy Borman, who is one of the joint chief curators of Historic Royal, which part of it looks after Hampton Court Palace, and gave her a bit of the backstory, not quite the backstory there, but Tracy and Sandy had already had contacts in the past, and I mentioned a bit of extra information that Sandy very kindly gave me. And Tracy, bless her, she was straight away so keen to know more, very interested to talk to Paul. And yes, it's thanks to Tracy and Sandy that this whole thing has happened, really, to get the ball rolling, to get us to the position where we are now. Yeah, it's just absolutely incredible.
Well, really, it's thanks to you, because I had been in communication with Tracy a little bit, but not where I think it would be, oh my gosh, there's this amazing discovery. You need to hear about it. So I knew that James held a lot of credibility with her, and she is very, she's very kind. And I mean, she's one of the curators for Historic Royal Palaces. So kind of nobody better to, to kind of think about it. And she did express interest right away, but of course had to talk. And we were in the middle of, a bad time, and, the Historic Royal Palaces was making no money. And, so she had to communicate with her management. And there were periods of time when it would just kind of go quiet.
Yeah.
But and so we did not really know that it was going to end up hitting the press like it has.
Yeah.
Right? We kind of hoped, and we hoped we could see it one day, but she had said you guys had what was it, the Field of Cloth of Gold exhibit on at the time?
Yes, yeah, that was in the summer. That's right. It did go quiet at times, and like you said, Historic Palace was in a very bad financial position. The end of last year and starting this year was not a great time. And there was talk of, how it could potentially work and everything. There's all the other stuff aside of having it on display, and eventually having it at Hampton Court and everything. But yeah, there was the Golden Glories, it was called, the Field of Cloth of Gold exhibition was on the time summer when I think we heard more about it. I'm trying to remember the exact timeline now. Also, the last year, now when you look back at it, all seems to blur into one, but then you remember that there were periods where it did go a bit quiet, and then it sort of sparked up again and everything. And bless Tracy, she was so wonderful. She was constantly keeping us informed of as much as she could of everything going on and everything.
Yeah.
It's just wonderful to think of this artifact going back kind of home, because I mean, surely it was either at Hampton Court Palace or perhaps even the Tower of London. It might have been there, but it fits more with Hampton Court Palace, I think, doesn't it? Because there are, those falcons on, there are the crests on the ceiling, aren't there, in the Great Hall and that. So it kind of seems really lovely that it's going back home. But it must have been amazing when it was restored, and, to find that actually it was in good condition and it still had some of the, the original gilding and colours on it. I mean, it's staggering. But Yes, so good.
And I think, it was actually Mr. Holston who had done some original research, because when they put it up for sale at Bonham's in 2019, they have, when you go to those auctions, they have those beautiful catalogs, and he did an entry for the catalog and had done some original or some initial research. And it appears like, and James kind of knows where on the ceiling. I think there are 2 or 3 that remain. I think James said they're way high up and near
very out of your eyes, out of eyesight. Basically, you have to know where they are really to look. And I don't think there's a very up to date picture of them, actually, to be honest, if there are any out there at all.
There was an architect by the name of Pugin who did a restoration and an analysis of the ceiling in, I want to say, the late 1800s. He was Victorian, and apparently they did scaffolding, and they got up there, he and his colleagues, and they took a lot of measurements of the carvings that are up there. So they do have measurements of the carvings, the Falcon carvings that remain there. And what they were able to do was to match those measurements almost precisely with this Falcon. And you can see that the carvings are almost identical. So it's believed then that Richard Ridge, who we think was the original, I guess he was like the master carver, who oversaw the group of people who were doing those carvings and placing them on the ceiling. It seems like it was him or his team who also created this. But, the belief is that this one was probably in her private apartments and not on the ceiling.
Okay.
It was thought initially that, because I think there was a part of the rood screen in the Great Hall, James, the screen that is there where you go into the Tudor apartments. And I think there's part of it that's been removed or something many, many years ago. So, there was speculation, could it have been there? But I think the analysis, so the restoration process done by Ian Crick-Smith, who heads kind of probably the most prestigious antiques restoration company in the UK. He was the one who worked on it. And I know Paul told me that Mr. Crick-Smith said to him that clearly when you are in its presence, when you're working on it, it has a very distinct aura of importance. Like there's something about it that is not just your regular, piece of ancient and valuable wood or artifact. He felt that it had something really special about it. So, and as he was removing, so I mentioned to you, Claire, there is a report that comes out after that. And as he was removing the layers, they do a very detailed chemical analysis on them so that you can see what the layers are. And there's actually the photos of the electron micrograph images, kind of the side images, so you can see the layers. And then the analysis comes out because they do an analysis of each layer. So very interestingly, there was dirt, obviously, and dust. There was black paint. There was soot. And along with the soot, there was beeswax. So I thought that was like incredibly interesting. And to me, that was the signal that it was either during the time that it was at Hampton Court, it was either in her apartments where it would be more likely to get a beeswax coating with all the tapers and the candles that were there. And of course, we know beeswax was expensive. Or maybe it was on display in someone's home, or they had it in someone's home once it was removed and saved. Because of course, that's the other part of the story. How did it get to where it is today? So, and I'd like for us all to speculate on that, but I can tell you a little bit about the analysis. So the first layer was soot, dirt, and beeswax, and the second layer had these things, and I wrote them down from the report because I think they're interesting. Calcium carbonate. So this was paint flecks.
Yeah.
They were able to take a tiny little fleck of paint and do an analysis of it, because of course, as he started to clean off, it's like, oh my gosh, here's the original gilt and paint that this bird had. Calcium carbonate, lead oxide, which of course we know they used a lot of, lead paint, cinnabar with the red areas, red lead, gold, silver, and cochineal. Is that how you say it? Cochineal? Yeah. Cochineal. Yeah. So we know cochineal was used for red tinting at that point. So was cinnabar, and actual real gold, real silver. And then, the lead oxide, which was the white paint. So, that started to give a great deal of credence that it came from that era, which, I think is pretty. And then, of course, as he continued to work on it, it was shocking because apparently this coat of beeswax and soot and then some black paint on it protected all of the undercoating. Like when stuff gets buried in the sand, the Titanic and all of that, some of that just really preserves the original surface. And, lo and behold, it has almost the entirely total original surface on it of paint and gilt.
It's incredible that you just think about, Henry VIII destroying all these things that were Anne related. I mean, we know there are still, some of the HA motifs that he kind of missed at Hampton Court Palace as well. So they weren't that thorough. But it just makes you wonder how this one carving got away and why it ended up being painted black as well. I mean,
so what do you guys think?
I'd love to think that an Anne supporter kind of smuggled it, that, one of her ladies, or I don't know, Archbishop Cranmer or someone that was, sympathetic to her cause, just, saved it and put it away. And over time, perhaps it got painted in black. I don't know why to hide it. To someone fancied making it black. I don't know. Yeah.
What do you think, James? I mean, let's assume, what if it was in her original apartments, like, over the mantle in her bedchamber, which makes a lot of sense because I think, she would have had a hearth and it would have been, the wood surround would have been carved and, and where were her chambers then, James, in Hampton Court Palace? I know they're not there any longer, but what kind of got overlaid that?
So her apartments, where they would have been, now roughly on the site of where the now Queen's apartments, which is known as the Georgian apartments, basically, started being built in the late 1600s, completed in the early 1700s or so. There's possibly some work that had gone on before then to update the rooms and everything, but it has been always known that it was pretty much, as we know, the time of Anne's arrest, as I always say to people, 2nd of May, executed less than 3 weeks later on the 19th. So there was like this breakneck speed to remove everything as possible, so much that's connected to her. and replace it with everything that was going to be connected with Henry's next queen, who's already in waiting. So I do like to think that the Falcon would have been preserved by one of her supporters, to sort of protect it, to keep her memory going and stuff. It kind of, to me, that makes the most sense, because if it had been her private apartments, I think the chance that it would have been spotted. Certainly by, Henry would have visited Jane in her private rooms. And yeah, it would have. So I do think for that, at least, although it has also been said that Jane, so Jane obviously it's popularly said that she, or believe that she moved into Catherine of Aragon's rooms whilst the Queen's apartments that had been newly built for Anne were being completely refurbished for her, and it said that that's where she gave birth to Edward, where she then also died. So if that's the case, then maybe they were in the process of secretly removing this falcon to sort of hide it by one of Anne's supporters. Yeah, it's but I do think, I mean, it makes absolute sense. I know we can never say we know for definite, but it does make sense that it was hidden by one of her supporters to sort of keep her memory alive. Of course, because we now know with hindsight that Anne's daughter would come to the throne and would become one of the most famous monarchs in history, certainly almost eclipsing her father, Henry. But at the time, no one would have known this. It was pretty much, so to take that to sort of keep Anne's memory going was pretty much their only hope they had.
Yeah. And of course, Elizabeth made use of her mother's falcon badge as well. So I love that. I love that the white falcon got used by Elizabeth as well. But I mean, they even did things like to kind of cut corners. I suppose it was because of the speed of the events of May 1536 that they changed like Anne Boleyn's leopards into, because the leopard became, I think, from Anne's Howard ancestry, the Brothertons, into, I think, the first Duke of Norfolk in the 14th century. They changed the leopard into Jane Seymour's panther, didn't they? I love that.
Right.
We'll just paint it up and just change it.
Jane, she really got a lot of hand-me-downs.
Yeah. Do a bit of touch up, and I think it happened with some of the other heraldic beasts around the palace, where maybe Henry changed one wife and had the next one lined up. It's like there's often a quick turnaround going on, but
I suppose cutting corners, cutting costs,
and speed. Somehow as I thought about the life of this, this beautiful carved bird and how it could have possibly come to light again today. And of course, I asked Paul, do you know who was the dealer? Whose estate did this come from? Just to see if there was any way that you could kind of trace back. But, he didn't know. And I think there's a huge gap in there in which we'll never know. But I'll tell you what, like the picture that comes to my mind, and that is that this was part of her private apartments, her privy chambers, maybe a watching chamber or a receiving room, or even her bed chamber. And then when things went so terribly awry and there was a bevy of workmen sent out to, take things off of walls. But of course, they didn't want to pull down the whole wall. They were going to remove things that were exactly pertinent to her. As we know, in the court at that time, there was plenty of money exchange going. So clearly you're right, Cranmer, one of the nobles, one of the families who supported her, I'm picturing them giving some, little work boy who was charged with, you chip down and take down every falcon you see where they are in these 3 rooms, you go take them down and, you put them here, and somebody paid, one of the workers, you slip this to me. You give it to me and I'll give you a, whatever. I'll give you a gold whatever. And that's how it went to one of the families, who then took it and preserved it. And maybe they did have it sort of on display in their house. And that's how it got a lot more beeswax. Because think about, if it had sat there just for the duration, let's say it was in her apartment over her hearth, how would, it was just couple years. I mean, at the most, not even. Who knows how long and how much she was in residence in those rooms. So how would it have gotten the coating of soot and beeswax? So I'm thinking that happened at somebody else's home. Yeah. And that maybe then it was painted over so that it wouldn't be quite so noticeable, but that it wasn't taken and stuffed in a drawer or a chest somewhere, but that it was actually kind of on display in that family's home for, for some years, but it was painted over to have it not be like this white and gilt and red and white, noticeable thing.
Or perhaps because it was so sooty, perhaps they kind of thought the person that painted it black, perhaps they thought it was supposed to be black. And so they painted it black. There's a novel in this, Sandy.
That there's going to have to be. That's right. That's right. I mean,
you're going to have to write this. Yep. This is going to be the provenance of this. You're going to have to.
There is a book, and I already have the title, and the title is Rage and the Relic.
Oh, I like this.
And the Relic. So his rage did not suppress Anne's relic.
Oh, I love that.
There it lay, or it's just like, it's almost as incredible to think of the 400 plus years and where it could have been during that time as it is to think of its recovery from where it was. So, and also, by the way, it really is incredible. And there has been dendro dating on it, and the wood matches that time period.
Yeah.
Early English oak. There's no question that it was a badge of Anne's. I mean, I think there's zero debate about that. Where it was, but it is uncanny that it's exactly the same as the other ones in Hampton Court.
Yeah. Right. So it's going on loan to Hampton Court. Is that right?
Yeah. He wants it to be on a long-term loan.
So it'll be on display at some point in Hampton Court Palace.
Yeah.
For us to go and see and pay our respects to.
Yes, it will. And Paul has said it is just, when you hold it, when you look at it, it is just amazing. It's amazing. And, just to give some kudos and credence to him. I have not had a chance to meet him yet. We have spoken a lot, and he just is somebody who, he said, it's all about the passion that I have for these things. And he said, all I can tell you is I just have a sense of these items, what is real, what has had a history, what has had an important background. And he said that I can just tell you that's what it is like for me. And that's how, he runs his business. And of course, some of the things that he sells are so just unbelievably gorgeous and amazing. And
I went and had a little browse of his website.
Is that like eye candy or what?
Oh yes, yeah. We need to give him a shout out, don't we? Paul Fitzsimmons is it Marham Church Antiques?
Marham Church Antiques.
I'll put a link to his website in the description,
because it's so fun to look through.
Yeah.
And I would say it's surprising. I mean, a lot of the items, you might think you look at this and it's like valued at whatever. A lot of his items are not nearly as expensive as you would think that they would be. Like for us, we think, oh my God, these things should be in a museum. They're, this was the Henry VIII era. This was the Elizabethan era. But, they are acquirable, and it's pretty incredible to have something in your home, even if it's a very small thing and it really comes from that era. It's like freaky.
Yeah, to have a piece of Tudor history at home. Yeah.
I know. It's just it really.
Oh, I think it's wonderful that Paul is loaning it to Hampton Court Palace so that people can enjoy it rather than it going off like so many things have, disappearing into private collections or being in bank vaults, or I'm still want to find that the missing portraits of Anne Boleyn. That's in a bank vault somewhere.
It's got to be around. So, well, you know what? Who knows? It could be. I mean, in England, there are so many amazing like attics of like these old homes that it's probably sitting around in somebody's attic somewhere. Yeah. Just like this, this Falcon was. Just who knows where it was. And
here it is, mixed up with a load of other things that, it's so such
James,
an incredible story.
If they do a display, where do you think it will be at Hampton Court?
Oh, God, I mean,
if you could design the display, where would you put it?
Oh gosh, that's a really. I would say. I mean, first place I'm sort of thinking of is the Great Hall, because that. I mean, all of Hampton Court Palace is, well, maybe not the Baroque side of stuff, but the Tudor side has, in my words, as I always say to visitors, Anne Boleyn's DNA stamped throughout it. It's she and Henry set about designing that palace together. We have so many records, thousands and thousands of records of them, and we know that they looked at the building works together. They basically, designed the palace, and the Great Hall in particular is like the remnant of all that. It's like when you stand in there, you've got the H&As, you've got the falcons in the ceiling. There's also a broken falcon on one of the screens, which to my knowledge, and to pretty much all my colleagues' knowledge, has not been given any focus before, but it's sort of there hidden away. So it does make you sort of wonder. I've been trying to take a good enough picture of it to share it, but it's incredibly hard to do, and it just comes out looking grainy or stretched every time. It just doesn't look right. But yeah, I would probably say the Great Hall, or maybe a smaller room somewhere a bit more intimate, if you could tie it in with something, give it its own sort of attention and everything.
That's really, really cool.
That'd be wonderful to have an Anne Boleyn exhibition with lots of artifacts like the medal, the checkers ring. Bring them all together with the Falcon. That would be wonderful, wouldn't it? If you could borrow all of those bits and pieces.
There has been talk about doing a documentary on the items that are her artifacts, either known or presumed. And of course, there's the beautiful Book of Hours that James and I saw together at the British Library, where she and Henry wrote inscriptions to each other, which is like, also so amazing when you look at it and you think about it. But one of my favorites that's not talked about that much is that beautiful Golden Girdle book that's also in the British Library.
Yeah.
That, the early writings of Wyatt described that it was, in fact, with her. And I know there's, just like the splinters of the true cross of Christ, there are so many things that people say that she took to the scaffold.
Yes.
With her.
She must have had a very big bag on that day.
She had like a big bag of like stuff. So, but I think that beautiful Golden Girdle book, I think that she may have had that there. And that is what, the history, the Wyatt family history says, but of course, there are a lot of people who will dispute that. However, but yeah, there are quite a few very interesting items that can be attributed to her, and sometimes the more mysterious they are, the more fun they are to think about and intriguing. Where was this, and did she touch it, and did she and Henry share it, and did they touch it together? And again, James, you just talk about the plans and everything that they did together for that amazing, magnificent great hall and the beautiful Hampton Court, and it just again makes you think, like, what a shame.
I know.
What they could have accomplished together had things not gone awry. It's staggering.
All of that work, and then such a short time to enjoy it all. And things never got completed, did they? But
no. And I like to think about what, together, had they continued to work as a productive team, what they could have accomplished, because, they kind of each enhanced the other's abilities and intellect and appreciation for art and religion and music, and they kind of in many ways brought out the best in each other until he just was not able to see it that way.
I think they were a powerhouse, a force to be reckoned with together. That yes, it's just sad how it all came crashing down. But
Anne will have her say.
Oh, she will. Yes.
And this is like a perfect example of don't count me out. I'm still here.
Yeah, definitely.
Goes to show that so much more to be discovered, and there's always something new. There's so much still out there. So like you say, Claire, the portrait, it's got to be out there somewhere.
It's got to be. I know it was cut down at one point. We've got records for that, but it's definitely out there somewhere. It's either it's in a private collection and that person doesn't want anyone to know about it, doesn't want to have to insure it, or someone doesn't know what they've got.
They don't know what it is. It could be in such bad shape that nobody would know what they have or haven't looked up there for a long time, or
But it just goes to show. I mean, people say all the time, they're now this many years on, you're not going to find anything new. There's no new information. There's no new. This just goes to show that is so wrong.
That's right.
Discoveries can still be made. And I thank you so much to both of you for joining me for this. I just really wanted to get the story from you rather than rely on just the newspaper reports and that. It's such a fascinating story, and a big thank you and shout out to Paul Fitzsimmons as well for this discovery and for actually allowing this artifact to be shared rather than hiding it away and nobody ever seeing it. I mean, it's such a great man to do that. So, but yes, nice. I'm going to share in the description for this video. I'll be sharing links to Paul's website. And I wrote an article ages ago on the Anne Boleyn files on Anne Boleyn's badge and heraldry and explaining the falcon and the leopard and what she used in that. So I'll put a link to that as well for people to learn more about that. Yeah. But it's been wonderful chatting to you both. We don't do this often enough, do we? It's so lovely to chat. Yeah. So really nice.
We should have a little session where we talk more about some of the mysterious artifacts.
Yes, definitely. And Sandy, you've got to get on with this novel.
I know. I'll start with Rage and the Relic. It'll be out next week. But it's definitely a thought. So, but thank you guys. It's been so much fun, and there will be more to come about this. As it becomes, as we find out when it's going to be on display. And I know Paul has been somewhat overwhelmed by the influx of journalists and reporters, but I'm sure he'll be able to share a little bit more of the story, some more details. So I'm just telling you, from my conversations with him, what I know, but there's more there. And it'd be interesting to talk to to Ian Crick-Smith as well, his restoration. So
yeah, I think that would be very interesting to carry this on and get even more information. But thank you both. Okay. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much, all. Sending you kisses from the US and
love to you from Spain.